Hey there, YouTube. My name is Todd Morrison. I'm the author of this book, A Profound Mercy, Finding Redemption in the Despair of Our Own Doing. You can find it at Todd on Amazon.com. But I want to tell you a little bit about me and what this book's all about. The famous French philosopher Blaise Pascal is credited with saying this, that God created man in his own image and then man returned the favor. Sadly, Blaise Pascal got it right. So much of the pain and the brokenness that we experience in this life is the result of experiencing God and viewing God in human terms and believing that God deals with us with the same criteria we use to deal with and to judge and to hurt one another. So if you have given up on God for any reason, or if you've never been interested in God because you didn't think God was relevant in your life, or maybe it's because you see the hypocrisy in the church, or maybe it's because you've got enough judgment in your life that you don't need a cosmic judge to make things worse for you, this book is for you. I wrote this book for you. It's the story of my life, and it's a story which, if I hadn't lived it myself and experienced it firsthand, I wouldn't believe it, probably. I grew up with missionary parents in idyllic places like Copenhagen, Denmark, yet my life would turn out to be anything but idyllic. My father was holding a secret that would ruin my parents' marriage and blow up my family so badly that we would never fully recover from it. I was 14 years old when I learned what that secret was that my father was holding. My family had just moved from Chicago to Tallahassee, Florida, at a time when people in Tallahassee were still angry at me, I guess, because the South had lost the Civil War 130 years before, or whatever it was. And while we were there, my dad surprised me with a weekend trip to see the Chicago Cubs play the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta. But baseball was not the reason that we went to Atlanta. It's not what that trip was really about. The first morning we were there, my dad took me to a restaurant that he was familiar with, and it was very clear that he knew Dwayne, the waiter there, and that they had had some history together. And Dwayne was obviously gay, and the fact that he and my dad knew each other had me wondering, what kind of history they actually had. And then after breakfast, we went to a cruising spot where several men were sitting in a line of cars alongside a street in a neighborhood, just waiting for someone to roll up and somebody that they could hook up with. So I didn't realize that they were waiting for me until we pulled up to a late model Mercedes, and the driver of that car was a man wearing a trench coat with literally nothing underneath. And he began revealing to me what was underneath that trench coat, until he looked up and realized he was staring at a 14-year-old kid. And to his credit, he then covered himself up. But in that moment, my world stopped making sense. My dad was not the person that I thought he was. My dad was not telling me that he was gay. He was showing me that he was gay, and he was doing it in the creepiest way possible. And now I had information about my parents' marriage and why it wouldn't work, and information about how my family would blow up that my own mother didn't have about her own marriage and family. And I didn't know how to hold that. I didn't know how to deal with that. So I got angry. I got angry with everyone and everything around me. And it got so bad that the last decision that my parents ever made together was to ship me off to Michigan to live with my relatives, to be somebody else's problem. And after a year in exile in Michigan, I was returned by my relatives to my father, and I live with my dad and his first live-in partner. And our happy little party of three landed in Charleston, South Carolina, right in the middle of the tourist district, right at the corner of King and Calhoun Street. My dad had cashed out his corporate job and purchased a 1-hour photo shop, and the serendipitous forces of nature or something caused a convergence that you couldn't have planned if you really wanted to. So there was a couple from Colorado, just beautiful people, who purchased a hoagie shop next door to my dad's Photoshop. And these beautiful people had never been in the hoagie business. They didn't even look like they'd ever been in a hoagie store before, let alone owning a hoagie shop. And the reality was they hadn't been. You know, like I said, they're beautiful. They're bronzed and tanned and blonde and beautiful jewelry. And that was just the guy. The woman was also spectacularly beautiful and adorned in much jewelry. They had, in fact, never owned a hoagie shop. They were cocaine dealers, high-end cocaine dealers with ties to the mob in Denver, Colorado. And in Colorado, they came very close to being arrested to the point where they were only able to grab their go bags and head east in search of a better life. And they tried to go legit by buying this hoagie shop. But after 3 months of giving it a solid try, they gave up on that hoagie shop and decided that it took a lot more effort to make a lot less money if you were going to do it legitimately. So they recruited my dad and his partner and a couple other people to sell cocaine for them. And that's when things got really bad in my world. I was just 16 years old at the time. I was trying to go to high school. And my dad was now selling cocaine, and not only selling it, but using a lot. In fact, they didn't take my dad, who came from a highly dysfunctional and alcoholic family, very long to start using a lot more cocaine than he was selling. So 6 months into this or so, maybe not even that long, I woke up one morning to get ready for school, and there was a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Hey, bud, had to leave. Can't tell you where we're going. I'll be in touch. Love, Dad." And I remember being so absolutely relieved. I was relieved because though I love my dad, having him live that kind of life and try to survive was very difficult for me. In fact, the first time I ever tried cocaine, it was at the behest of my dad. I have to believe he was higher than a kite when he pushed a small mirror in my direction and said, "Hey, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this." And I said no every time until the last time. I finally just gave up because he was so persistent and I was so weak, I guess, that I tried a small line of cocaine, which remains one of the saddest experiences of my life. So when they were gone, I was relieved. Well, William, the guy that my father was working for, ended up pulling me close. And he pulled me close because he wanted to know where my dad was. And he thought the fastest way to figure out where my dad was and to get to my dad was through me. But it didn't take long for William and I both to come to the realization that we had both been royally screwed over by my father, and I didn't know where he was. And that created a type of bond, or created the circumstances for a bond to exist between us. And so William ended up bringing me close, and I ended up dropping out of high school and becoming one of his most trusted workers. In fact, I became the most trusted worker. When it came time for us to get a new shipment of cocaine, William would get on the train, which was the easiest way to do it back then in the late 80s, and he would take a train down to Miami. He would load up with several bricks of cocaine. He would come back to Charleston. I would pick him up ever so subtly in his Porsche 928, and we would drive back to his gated community, where we would turn on the screen where we could see all the entrances to that community, and we would sit at his living room table with a triple beam balance scale, a bunch of cocaine, and his 9mm pistol, and I would spend several hours packaging that cocaine into 8 balls, or 1/8 of an ounce packages that I would then go and distribute to our dealers. That was my life, and I thought it was a great life until it wasn't. You know, it was fun for a while because we were all making money, and I was 16 and then 17, and I was getting into all the clubs in Charleston, and people knew me, and it was great until lives started to be broken and relationships were shattered. And I could tell you, and I do in this book, several times when I was nearly arrested, nearly killed, nearly both on a couple of occasions at the same time. And it was very stressful, and it was terrifying at times. And so I would come back to my bed at 4 in the morning and throw myself into the pillow, and I would cry out to God, and I'd say, "God, if you're there, you know, remember me. I'm that kid with the missionary parents that believed in you when I was young. If you're still there, get me out of this." And then I'd sleep for a few hours and wake up and rinse and repeat and do the same thing over again. It wasn't until I called my uncle in Chicago, just for whatever reason. I'm not even sure why I called him. And he told me on this particular call that my grandfather was dying of cancer and only had a few weeks to live. And my grandfather was a hero in my life, somebody that I looked up to, and I wanted to see him before he died. So I flew to Chicago, went to my grandfather's house, and this is a day I'll never forget as long as I live. It was a late September day in Chicago. It was beautiful. It was about 70 degrees and sunny. And I knocked on the door, not knowing what in the world I was going to say to my grandfather, what we would talk about. And I went into his house, and his wife had closed all the curtains in the house, and it was dark and gloomy. It was kind of like death was lingering in the air, just waiting to take my grandfather, and it was depressing. And I saw my grandfather. He's laying in his bed and just looked like a shell of the man that I once knew, and I didn't know what to say, so I just sat down next to him, and we had milkshakes because it was the only thing that he could eat. And after a few minutes of what feels like a few minutes of awkward silence, he just reached out, put his bony hand on my knee, and he began to cry. He began to weep. And he said, "Todd, I'm so sorry for all that's going on in your life. I'm so, so sorry." And I knew that he didn't know exactly what was going on in my life, but I know that he could probably look at me and realize I wasn't doing okay, that I was living on the ragged edge, and it broke his heart. And that was this profound encounter for me that changed my life forever. Like, here's my grandfather. He's dying. He's suffering. And he died 6 weeks later. And yet, in his suffering, what matters most to him in that moment is the pain that he can discern by looking into my eyes. And my pain broke his heart. And he wept over my life. That had a profound impact on me. I went from that experience, not fully understanding it for a while, but understanding enough to where I called William down in South Carolina and said, "Hey, I have to get out of this." And at first he said, no, come on, let's come back and talk. He was afraid I had some kind of religious experience and I was going to feel compelled to, confess my sins and get them all arrested. But that's not what I did. They finally realized, he and some others that we were working with realized, because they were all so much older than me, that they were, really ruining my life, and they had to give me a shot at making my own choices. And so they threw me a huge party on William's yacht in Charleston Harbor and sent me off to Chicago for a new life. And what I realized in that experience is that God had been pursuing me, and he used my grandfather as a way of reaching out and saying, "Hey, I'm here for you." And so when I left Charleston, 3 weeks later, after I left, they were all arrested. There'd been a sting operation that was going on, and while I was there, but I didn't matter enough apparently to chase me to Chicago, but they were all arrested. And William skipped town or went into witness protection or did something. We never heard from him again. But lives were ruined, and God spared me from so much. Death, betrayal, arrest, a criminal record, so that I had a shot at having a real life. Maybe this is an opportunity for you, if you're watching, to realize that God is pursuing you. And the same God that pursued me is pursuing you in this moment. And he is a God of love, not a God of anger. His first move towards us isn't, "Man, I'm so disappointed with you." His first move towards us is, "Man, I love you so much. I've got so much in store for you. I've got love, not anger. I've got hope, not judgment. I've got purpose, not discouragement for you." He's got forgiveness for us if that's what we need. In fact, one of the things I've been doing is, as I've been speaking and talking with people about my book, I was at a book club with just some friends that are in this book club not too long ago, and there's an atheist in this book club, and this atheist told me that I presented a God that she didn't know existed in this book. And so if there's hope for that atheist, there might be hope for you. So here's the deal. I'd love for you to read this book. The book is, again, A Profound Mercy, and the subtitle is Finding Redemption in the Despair of Our Own Doing. You can find it at toddonamazon.com. And if you're a leader of an organization or a club or a church or a business, and you'd like somebody to come and speak and tell stories of redemption, and doesn't have to be about all about God. It can just be about hope and redemption if that's better suited for your organization. I'd love to come and do that. Love to talk to you about God first and foremost. But if that's not appropriate for your situation, I fully get it. You can reach out to me via email at todd@toddmorrison.live. You can reach me on my website at toddmorrison.live or on my Facebook page, A Profound Mercy. I'd love to hear from you. Love to set something up. Love to visit with you and your team, or you and your organization, you and your club, and talk about the power of redemption and the power that mercy can have once we recognize that it's pursuing us in our lives. All right. Thanks so much. Look forward to hearing from you.